Hello everyone, it's Shari here today, and in today's video I'm going to be making this bright and happy holiday card. So the first thing I'm going to do is create my background, and I'm going to be using Distress inks. And lately I have really liked using Bristol Smooth Surface cardstock to do that. And this card is going to be larger than our typical A2 size card. This is a 5" by 7" card. So I'm cutting my Bristol piece down to 5" by 7", and I'm going to start with cracked pistachio just right in the middle here. So this is going to kind of have a glowing look with a lighter color in the center, and then I'm going to work my way out to some darker colors around the edges. So once I've got a nice circle of cracked pistachio there in the center, I'm going to go in with peacock feathers and pull some darker colors towards that circle that I created. So I'm going to focus most of my blending energy on the top of this panel because the bottom is going to be covered up with some glitter to look like snow. And I'm just going back and forth between my colors till I get that harsh edge gone. I'm also using a piece of paper to protect this paper from my fingers. The Bristol, the ink kind of sits on top a lot longer, and so it'll catch your fingerprints by touching it. So this will help protect that so that that doesn't happen. And then finally, I'm going in with blueprint sketch towards the top. You can see you get that nice dark at the top, which makes the center look even more like a glow, which is the look I'm going for. So again, I'm just going back and forth until I get the look that I want. So once I've got that looking the way I want it here, I'm going to make sure it's nice and dry because I'm going to do some stenciling on this and some glitter that I'm going to add to the paste that I put through the stencil. So I've dried it with my heat tool. I'm also going to add some of my anti-static powder to make sure it's nice and dry. So I'm going to be using this Wendy Vecchi art station, and it's just a metal mat. I put a little bit of removable adhesive on the back of my panel, and this way it will stay on my mat where I put it. And then I can line up my stencil and use the magnets to hold the stencil in place. So I found that this works really well and a lot better than tape for me because I get messy with tape. So I'm going to line up my snowy sky stencil just with the top. I'm not going to worry about the fact that this panel is longer than the stencil because this stencil kind of goes from a lot of snow at the top to none at the bottom, and that just works perfectly for what I'm doing here. So I'm going to use the magnets that go with the mat to hold the corners of my stencil. And I'm going to use some distressed grit paste that's translucent along with some Prisma glitter. And this is why I wanted to make sure that this panel was nice and dry. I will be honest that even after all the drying, some of the glitter still stuck to the panel where the ink is, and not really stuck. I dusted it away with a brush and it was all fine, but I probably would have let this sit overnight. That's the lesson I learned. So I'm just using a palette knife and I'm getting that grit paste out of there and just smearing it all over, making sure I get into all those little openings for that snowfall. And then I'll just scrape the excess away. So this particular paste dries translucent, so it's going to be a very subtle texture in the background. It's not going to be bright white like snow. So if you want the snowy look, there is a white texture paste as well that would work great for that. But I wanted my sentiment and the bright colors I used to be the star of the show. So now I can pull away that stencil and you can see that texture paste there. It's kind of clear looking. And then what I did is I dumped Prisma glitter on it and it will stick to that texture paste. So I've got my coffee filter here and I'm just going to hold it over that so it catches my glitter. But like I said, when I dump this off, you can see a lot of that glitter stuck to my background where my ink was, just because it was a little bit damp and there was some moisture. I flicked a lot of it off, but you can see it still looks shiny. So that's why you want to make sure that that background is nice and dry. But at this point, I'm just gonna go with it. I'm gonna figure out how to fix this and I'm gonna tell you what I did. So I just went in with a brush and kind of dusted off that excess glitter. And the glitter still stuck to that texture paste. And that extra glitter, because it's not stuck down with glue, got dusted away. So you get that very subtle shimmer in the background. So now for my sentiment. So we're making the sentiment that says, "May your days be merry and bright." So I'm using the Scripty Mary, and I've cut it from a gold glitter cardstock from the Autumn cardstock pack. And then I'm using Oliver's ABCs to cut out the word bright, and you can see I've used all these rainbow colors of cardstock. And for the smaller words above at the top of the sentiment, I'm going to create my own words using Riley's ABCs. So I'm just going to put those on a block. I've already dusted my little piece of black cardstock here with my anti-static powder tool because I'm going to white emboss those. So these words can all just be separate. I'm going to cut them apart into their own little blocks. So it doesn't matter what order I stamp them in or where on this cardstock because I'm just going to cut it apart. So I'm using my clear embossing ink and my white embossing powder. And I'm just going to go ahead and stamp out all 4 of those words so that I only have to heat up this piece of paper once to emboss all of them. So now I can just hit that with my heat tool till that white embossing powder melts and you get that nice bright white sentiment. And then there's always, even if you use the embossing powder tool, a few stray pieces every now and then. And if you're really kind of particular like I am, you can easily kind of scratch those away with the end of a craft knife. So that's just a little tip on how to clean up your embossing if you have a few stray pieces. So now I'm just going to use my paper trimmer and my scissors and just cut these apart into their own little squares. You can see I also did the word "and" there, but I actually changed my mind once I kind of had it laid on the card, and I did not like the "and" on a black block like the other letters or the other words, so I actually changed that up a little bit. But I'm going to use Smitty's ABCs for the "and," so I'm going to use the same stamps. I'm just going to stamp it directly onto my card when I get to that point. So for the bottom of the card, I'm going to use some pixie dust glitter cardstock and cut a stitched hillside. And then I also have the string of lights cut, and I cut all the little lights out of the same colors as my word bright. So all these colors are going to match. So I'm just going to go ahead and put my snow along the bottom. And this will give me a starting point to lay everything out on my card. So now for those strings of lights, I'm just kind of curving them a little bit with my fingers so they're not so straight. And I'm just going to lay everything out so I can get placement. You can see I'm moving things around a lot with my tweezers. They didn't want to slide around with that texture paste on there too well. So now that I have things where I want them, sort of, I'm going to start in the center and I'm going to work my way out. So I'm going to start with that Scripty Mary. So not only did I cut it out of that glitter cardstock, but I also cut it out of black cardstock 4 times, and I'm going to stack it so you get that nice thick sentiment that really stands off the background. So I'm just adding liquid glue to each of these, and I'll stack them one on top of each other, make sure they're lined up. And then I'll add a little bit more glue and stack another one. So from the side, this is going to look black, and then you're just going to have that really pretty glitter on the top layer. And I'm just cleaning it up when it kind of squishes out the sides there. Luckily, this glue dries clear, so you're not going to see it, but it's just better than having a little glue bob in the middle of my E. So once that's all stacked and prepped, I can put that right on my card base. Actually, this is just the card front. So what I realized was, because I want to pop some of these things up with foam, that I need to go ahead and put this on a card base. So you're going to see I'm going to dump everything off, but it's okay because the Mary's still there, and that's going to be my starting point to add all the other things. So to make a 5x7 card base, I have a piece of cardstock cut to 5x7, and then this one is 8.5 by 5. So 5 by 8.5. And then I just scored it at 1.5 inches to make it 5 by 7. And I'm going to glue these two pieces together to create a top folding 5x7 card. So I'm going to use a really strong tape runner. This is the Tombow Extreme. And I'm just putting adhesive on that little flap that I created, and then I can line up the front of my card with that flap. So this is my card base now, and then I can put my card front on it. And yes, you could just glue that card front directly to this little flap, but I just think that it really helps kind of give it some stability to put the card front onto another piece of cardstock. Also, if the back of it is kind of messy from doing all the ink blending, this will cover up kind of the messiness. So I'm putting that card front onto the card base that I created. And now that that's all put together, I can go back to assembling all the pieces on the front. So I'm going to use some thin foam squares. These happen to be black, and I think that goes well with the black cardstock of these little words that I have here. And I'm just adding a couple to each one and just popping them up above the word Mary. And I'm just changing the direction in which each of them go. I like that they're not straight, they're very playful looking. And then that part is all done. Now for the word bright, I also wanted to pop that up. You could stack all these letters, but I did not really want to do that. That's a lot of die cutting and stacking. So what I'm doing is I'm taking my foam squares here and I just cut them in half so you get these little rectangles, and that fits perfectly behind the letters of Oliver's. So you can see I'm just putting some little foam squares on the back of each letter. And I've got that "and" in the middle. Remember I said that I changed it up, which I did. It's just there kind of for placement, so I know where it's going to go and how much space it takes up. So I'm actually going to pull that out, and I'm going to stamp my "and." I'm going to use the same stamps, but I'm going to put it right directly onto my background. You could use a MISTI if stamping directly onto your card like I'm about to do makes you nervous. But I just use Smitty's ABCs. I'm just going to stamp it in a black ink. And then now that that's on there, I can go ahead and put all my letters for the word bright. And again, like the overall card layout, I like to start at the center and work my way out, because that way I know it's centered. I'm not going to start at the B and then by the time I get to the T, I'm too close to the right side of the card. So that's why I start in the middle and then go left or right or up or down. So now I can work on my lights, and I kind of had them up there sort of where I wanted them. I'm going to glue one of them down, and then that'll help me place the second one. And I like that they can overlap that way too. So I'm using liquid glue. I'm going to flip that one out of my way. And I'm just going to put the first one down. I'm going to let it overhang the sides and the top of the card base, and that way I could just trim off the extra of the string. And then I'm going to put a dot of glue on each of these and use my embellishment wand to pick up these little light bulbs and drop them down. Now there is a die with these light bulbs that cuts a solid piece that you could layer behind if you wanted a different color for that little shine mark, but I actually liked the way the black looked because it went with the other black parts of the card that I just think it looked really sharp with that black shine mark. So I just left it. So now for that second string of lights, I'm going to figure out where I want it and how many light bulbs I want to see. That's sort of what I'm figuring out here to try and get an even number of the colors. And I'm just putting a little bit of liquid glue on the back of each one and on the back of the string. And again, I feel like it's a lot easier to place this first and then put the light bulbs on. And the liquid glue really helps it stick to that background since there's texture and we're kind of going over other die cuts too. So again, I've just put a little dot of glue on each of those and I'm just going to pick up my little light bulbs with my embellishment wand and drop them right onto the string. These also look really cute if you put glossy accents or glitter on them, but I wanted to leave them plain for this particular card. And then here's where I decided that it was a little top heavy and I feel like it needed something at the bottom in the snow. So I pulled out my dies and I'm going to use these little trees from this shadow box add-on. And I've cut a tree from all the colors that I used in my word brighten with my little light bulbs. And I just decided to fill the snow at the bottom with these colorful trees. And I feel like this card has a real like Dr. Seuss, like Whoville, um, Grinch vibes going on with all these colors, but I really love the way it turned out with all these bright colorful trees at the bottom. I just think that these add a lot of balance to the card. It was just kind of empty, even though we had that pretty glitter snow. It just needed just that one extra thing. And then now that those are all in place, I'm going to add just a little bit of Stardust Stickles to each one so that we have some snow on the trees as well. And here is that finished card. I really love the way it turned out. I love those bright colors. It's so eye-catching. I love that distressed background and that subtle glittery snow. And I think I need to try making a 5x7 card again in the future because it was kind of fun to have a slightly larger canvas. Thanks so much for watching. Have an amazing day. Bye.